This video is sponsored by Fox 3 Managed Solutions. Use the coupon code above to get 10% off your subscription. All right, welcome back. This is going to be for brand new players to DCS. If you haven't done so already, check out my Getting Started video. I go over where to download DCS, how to install it, and how to configure your graphics. I go over a high-level overview of the menu here on this landing page so you know where everything is. Today, we're going to be going over keybinds and how to bind up your controls. Technically, DCS is flyable with mouse and keyboard. However, in my personal opinion, it does not seem to me that DCS was designed from the ground up with mouse and keyboard in mind. So I recommend that you go out, buy yourself a cheap starter stick. You don't need to break the bank here with a huge HOTAS system and a bunch of buttons. This right here is the Logitech Extreme 3D Pro. This is what I started off with, and is really the only cheap stick that I could give my opinion on, because I haven't flown with any of the other competitors to this. I think Thrustmaster has one that's a competitor to this, but this goes for 35 bucks on Amazon right now as of the making of this video, and it's got everything I need. You've got your pitch, your roll, your yaw, and you've got your throttle lever down here, and a bunch of buttons that you can use for different systems in the jet. It's everything you need in a small package. 35 bucks gets you started, right? So it's up to you. You can fly with mouse and keyboard, but my personal opinion, you're not going to have the best experience with DCS. Now, I know there's probably a couple of you that are furiously typing a comment right now. I can fly DCS, and I've been flying DCS with mouse and keyboard perfectly fine. You don't know what you're talking about. That's personal opinion of mine. I would prefer a stick over mouse and keyboard. You're going to have a way better time. You're going to give DCS a way better shot at impressing you if you actually use a joystick of some sort. All right, real quick before we get started, if you don't have the money for a joystick right now or for a HOTAS system or anything like that, and you just want to get into DCS, you don't like mouse and keyboard either, but you feel much more comfortable with a game controller, like an Xbox controller or something like that, go check out Tuvas on YouTube. He's got a bunch of videos out there with a wide variety of game controllers that he's bound to DCS, flying some of the most complicated and difficult modules like the A10C2, and actually able to effectively fly it in DCS with this game controller. So if that's what you feel more comfortable with, go check him out. Link in the description below. All right, moving on. All right, so today we're going to bind this thing up. I'm going to show you how to do that. There's two ways of doing this. You can either bind it by clicking the settings cog up here and clicking on the controls tab. If you're over here on system, just click on controls, and this will load up the entire control library for each jet. And you can click on this drop down menu at the top and select the jet or aircraft that you want to bind your joystick to, and the different controls that you can bind different buttons to as well. Now, the problem with this is once you've bound everything you want and you click OK and you leave here, then you got to load into a mission and try it out, and things might not be set the way you want. I cannot tell you how many people I've seen on public servers try to join a multiplayer session, and when they load into the jet, the throttle, for example, yes, it's bound, the axis is bound for the throttle, but even though it's physically in the idle position, the sim thinks it's in full burn, so they load up on a hot jet on the ramp, go full burn into somebody else, blows both of them up, and people are angry at them. So before you do anything, before you go into a multiplayer session especially, you're going to want to bind these things and make sure everything's set correctly so you don't have any inversion here and you have to invert the controls. So what I recommend is start with an instant action. So click instant action, select the plane that you want to bind your controls for, a map. Each map is going to have different missions. Right now we're just binding controls, so we're going to go with a free flight. And once we're loaded, we're just going to click fly, and you can look around with your mouse, but we're going to hit the escape key on my keyboard and then click adjust controls. And now you'll notice we have the exact same UI that we had over in the main screen when I clicked on the settings cog and went to controls. But we're loaded in the sim now. So if I make a change, I can bind something and then click OK and test it out right away. I don't have to load it. So that's why I prefer instant action. Up here at the top, like I said before, select the jet. To the right of that, you have another drop-down menu. You can search for controls by typing in a single word. You don't have to write the whole thing. So if I'm looking for landing gear, I can just type in landing, and it's going to pull up every control that has the word landing in it. Or I can do gear, everything that has the word gear in it, right? So you can search for them that way. Or you can go by the entire database. So all but axis commands is every button in the jet that doesn't have an axis control. Below that is just the axes. So these are all the axes commands. And then you can go by category. So countermeasures. This will be all the controls for countermeasures in the SU25T. So let's start with all but axis. This is all our buttons. First, let's go over the columns. The first column here is all your actions. Next is category. After the category is all your peripherals. Everything that you've got plugged into your PC has its own column. So my keyboard, my mouse, and my joystick, right? So if you want to bind something, you select that thing and then you double click on an empty space in the column of the peripheral that you want to bind. All right. So for the air brake, we have three options here. We can either bind a open or an on button and a separate off button, or Eagle Dynamics has been gracious enough to provide us with a cycle button. And this is with most controls, there's usually a cycle button to provide just a single button for those of us that don't have a lot of buttons to spare, so that we can just cycle those systems on and off instead of having to have two buttons wasted for one system, right? So in my situation, I don't have a lot of buttons, so I'm just going to use the air brake cycle button here. Now I can press the B key on the keyboard to open my brakes, or I can use my stick. And when I'm flying, I'd rather be able to just hit a button and have my air brake open. So we're going to double click on this open space under the Logitech column for air brake. Double click and then press the button that I want to use as my air brake button. So I'm going to press this one right here. There it is, button 6. We'll click OK. Now if you click away and then press the button that you just bound, it'll automatically highlight. So now you know it's bound. We're going to click OK and we're going to check this out. So the air brakes on the SU25 are on the wingtips. So we're going to look over here and I'll press the button and they're opening. Press the air brake button again and they close. Perfect. Hit escape. Click adjust controls. Let's try something else. Go to countermeasures here. And these are all my countermeasure controls. Now you'll notice we have the same issue. We've got a chaff dispense and a flare dispense. Now, this is good if you're trying to save chaff and flare individually. Like if I've got a Sidewinder headed at me, I can just dispense flares and not waste chaff, because chaff's not going to do anything for a heat-seeking missile, right? So if you value that more, you can, more than using the buttons for other things, you can have a chaff button and a flare button if you want. Me personally, I don't care. I'll just dispense both of them at the same time. Again, Eagle Dynamics was gracious enough to provide us a single button that dispenses both flare and chaff. So pressing Q on the keyboard, or I'm going to double click right here on my Logitech stick and I'm going to push this thumb button right here, button 2. Click OK, click away and push that button. Yep, good to go. We'll click OK and let's check it out. Make sure it works. There it is. Perfect. Hit escape, adjust controls. Now, one thing, let's see. Let's go to Axis. Axis commands. We don't have anything bound. So if I click OK, I'm not going to be able to fly the jet. Nothing's happening, right? So let's fix that. Logitech column, pitch. There we are. Double click right here. We're going to pull back on the stick and push all the way forward, and that's the Y axis. It's now bound. Click OK. Let's do the roll axis. So all the way left, all the way right. X axis is done. And let's do the rudder. So we're going to twist the stick left, twist it right. Got that axis. And again, 2 engines in the SU25, but we have been given a single axis for both engines where we can move both of them simultaneously with just a single slider. So I'm going to double click on this spot for thrust and move the throttle up and back and click OK. And here we go. We're good. And let's check, make sure all our axes are good here. Perfect. All right. Let's click OK. And let's test it out. Roll. Pitch. Yaw. Perfect. Check out the throttle. All the way up, all the way back. Perfect. Now, if you find that when you bind your throttle axis and you go all the way back to idle, but for some reason in the sim it thinks you're in full burn, and then when you go to full burn it thinks you're in idle in the sim, we can invert that. So go to adjust controls, click on the axis that's backwards and click axes tune, and then check the box to invert it. And that'll put it to where it's the way it's supposed to be. Another thing that you want to make sure to note is if your roll rate or your pitch rate is way too sensitive, when you pull up, the jet just snaps up, or your roll rate, you roll left and it's very sensitive and you feel like you won't be able to do any formation flying. Maybe you're trying to formation fly and this is just way too sensitive. You can lower that sensitivity by clicking on the axis that you want and then click Axis Tune and add a curve in there. I go up to like 16 or something like that. And so now you have a little bit more gentle, gradual movement of the flight controls from 0 all the way up to full deflection of the flight control surface, right? Not as snappy. If you're going to add curve on one axis, I recommend adding curve on the other axis as well. Oops, not double click. Axis Tune, and do the same thing here. 16 or 15 is fine. 18, that's fine, whatever. All right, so now it's better felt than explained. It's hard to explain, better to feel. And that's it. That's the basics. From here, just go and find all the buttons that you want to bind to different controls until it's the way you feel comfortable with your stick. Hopefully this was helpful. If you have any questions or if I didn't cover something, let me know in the comments section below and I'll get you an answer. See you guys in the next one.
Let's go. Yeah, way up there. Flame out.